Everybody keeps telling me, is AI going to replace me? AI will not replace you, but I can tell you one thing is people that use AI will replace people that don't use AI. But you will have to adapt to technology. You don't necessarily need to be early adopters, because early adopters, you need to make sure that you have the capacity, the financial means to do it sometimes, so you can play with technology. But you need to keep an eye and make sure that you're educated enough and know when to utilize or consume a certain service.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. I'm your host, Tom Hall from BluMortgage. Today, I talk with Joe Fakhri from Axiom Innovations. You probably know them as the creators of Scarlett Mortgage, Scarlett Pay, a bunch of products in the mortgage space. We have a great conversation. We talk about his origin story of how Axiom started, how he took a big risk, but that risk was well worth it with the reward he got at the end. We then quickly transitioned to his day-to-day today, now with Dong Lee coming in as a CEO, how that's changed and how he's now able to focus on building great products that minimize friction for their customers and introduce great technology at the same time. And no conversation would be complete without a little bit on AI, where he sees it's going. And as a sneak peek, he really emphasizes machine learning as actually maybe the next big thing. It's a great conversation. We'll see you on the other side. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I know I chatted with Dong a couple months ago, and he was telling me a little bit about what you guys have been up to. But it's kind of cool that for you and your perspective, you have both you and Dong wearing different hats, but also kind of very much so in leadership positions, that I can have this conversation and get kind of these different perspectives. So very much looking forward to this. Maybe just to start, Joe, I was kind of telling you earlier, I always like a good origin story. I think there's so much in there. So maybe I'd love to start with yours. You know, when you think about your journey, so to speak, with Axiom and Scarlett, you kind of gave me a little of a bio where you started kind of more of as an IT professional with a particular mortgage group. But just curious, kind of walk me through that journey. Was it always a vision of yours to, start a company like Axiom? Was it something that you just kind of fell into and said, hey, holy, there's an opportunity here, maybe a little bit of both? How did that go? And maybe, coming out of that, I'll have some follow-ups, but give me the high level of how did Axiom come to be? What was the birth story, so to speak?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm happy to share, and I'll try and condense it as much as I can, as 20-something years of history here, and I try and keep it short for the audience. So
it's like when you go to ChatGPT and you say make it shorter, right? That's what I'm doing. Yeah.
I'm still trying to get accustomed to prompt engineering, by the way, on that. So really, to be honest with you, like, being an entrepreneur always been part of my DNA in some shape or form. Even when I was in school and university, I've always thinking about potential projects or ideas for startups and what have you. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but long story short, after I graduated, and my background was purely in software engineering and business. And so after I graduated, I was working for a period of time. So I was employed for a few years for sure. And around 2008 about 2008, I was just finishing up some projects. At the time, it was Ford of Canada and a bunch of automotive organizations, including some financial institutions as well. We had built a very interesting, call it like automation and CRM platform for a lot of these companies.
Sure.
And so a friend of mine had heard about what we had developed, and introduced me to, if we want to name some names, introduced me to mortgagebrokers.com at the time.
Okay.
That my friend, like, we've been friends for quite a few years at the time of, we were in same university, introduced me to the folks at mb.com at the time of. Actually, Dong was there at the time too.
Small world.
And so technically it was a bit of a fluke how I stumbled onto the mortgage space, but I've had lots of experience in the financial services sector, being banks or RSP type organizations, then automotive. And so, obviously, we've had a pretty good long track record there, but I got introduced and they loved the idea that I pitched over to them. And that's kind of how the whole journey started. It started in 2008.
Yeah.
And I was technically doing a lot of work for that group. MortgageBrokers.com later became Pacific Mortgage Group. They owned Radius Financial. They owned Mortgage Architects. So I was involved with that group of companies up until early 2016. So 2016 is when I decided to leave and focus on building the Scarlett product. But so I worked in the space, in the mortgage space, all the way from 2008 up until 2016, and we were doing a lot of software development and custom software development for all the companies that I mentioned.
Yeah, sure.
But in 2015, I kind of started to think about what's next for me. I've kind of matured where I am, and I look forward to building something more industry grade, more bank grade type a platform. So technically, Scarlett was born in mid 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we decided to take all the learnings and all the knowledge that I've had over the years in the industry and make it an industry grade platform. And that's kind of like the super high level of
Condensed. Yeah. 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 Well, no, it's a great story. And I think, one thing that's really interesting for me is that leap, right? From, okay, whatever, 2018 to 2015, you're kind of in-house, so to speak. You were in-house in a bigger mortgage group.
running under the Axiom banner, though.
Sure.
From 2008 onward, running under the Axiom banner, but more like on an exclusive basis, right? And that period was very important because like it's all the learnings, it's getting your hands dirty, getting into an industry. I mean, I've had, like I said, financial services experience, but I wasn't in a mortgages business, right? Like it takes a while. There's lots. The learning curve's quite steep, and lots of process and procedures and rules and regulations, and it probably, on the same level as I do, because you're quite involved with that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely can relate to that. When I joined the industry, kind of 2018, 2019 time period, you're almost bright-eyed, bushy-tailed coming in saying, oh, yeah, I can come in and, bring a tech solution that'll whatever, do amazing things. And then you get in and every day you learn of a new nuance and a new nuance. And then you go. And then whatever, 5-10 years later, you go, okay, I kind of get it now. Maybe I was a bit naive back then. No, what is interesting to me is that leap. Okay, yes, it was under the Axiom brand, but you went out on your own, so to speak, and said, okay, I want to make Scarlett kind of an industry grade thing. Talk to me about your mindset at that time. Like, that is a risky move. And you can tell me if it was risky or not, but it sounds risky to me where you said, hey, I kind of have a nice, cozy, good thing going here, but now I want to take that and kind of put it out into the wild, so to speak, and make it its own standalone product solution that I'll go out and bring to the industry. So yeah, what was kind of that moment for you? Was it risky? Was it scary? And kind of how did you decide that it was the right move at the time?
No risk, no reward. I mean, I just want to put it that way. Absolutely, it's very risky. At the time of so I literally moved on from the Pacific Mortgage Group February of 2016. That's when I completely left the organization, went on to focus on building Axiom in a Scarlett product. And it wasn't called Scarlett at the time, I'll just say no. It was called Utopia. But I went on to build the organization at the time and fully focus on that because I had my hands into a few things. But nonetheless, I want to preface that at the time I was actually, for somebody at mid-30s, I was making a comfortable amount of money, and I didn't need to really make that move. But at the end, I saw an opportunity. The industry was underserved. And if we go back to 2016, there were a ton of technology organizations focused on the space. All the large organizations that provide similar solutions were not really all that interested in our space because maybe for them it wasn't big enough, or the pie wasn't large enough. So it was a bit of a perfect setting for organizations our size, right?
Totally.
But would I tell you that I was 100% sure that it's going to be a success? I'd be lying to you if I said yes. But
of course,
you got to take your risk. I saw the opportunity. I was already at the time, pitching to a number of different organizations, such as Vericle prior to the M3 acquisition, to BFG Broker, to a number of brokerages and financial institutions, like even on the lending side, offering our services and what is it that we were embarking to build at the time of. Well, it was absolutely quite risky. I took a significant financial hit, and I could tell you, from 2016 till 2020, I was living off my savings.
Wow.
That's just to be clear.
Wow.
October of 2020 is when I officially went on salary at Axiom Innovations.
No kidding. Wow.
Absolutely.
That's insane. And I think just for anyone listening, I think there's a lot of people, maybe similar but different situation to you, which is maybe it's their own brokerage. They have some success. They build an internal tool that really works well for them. And they're saying, okay, I'd love to take this tool and bring it to the industry. But just hearing that, I mean, I think it's both points, right? Which is one, there is a lot of risk. I mean, there's financial risk, reputational risk, across the board. And 4 years of living out of your savings, that is financial risk. But now I see it today. Let's fast forward to today. I think we can both confidently say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, is that you got that reward. And if you can correct me again. I don't think it's also just so much the financial reward, and you don't have to be specific on that, but it's also, I think, the lifestyle. Like, you always said that, or you said earlier that the entrepreneurial gene is in your DNA, and you get to live that to the fullest. So I'd imagine that you got that kind of quote unquote reward in both those aspects, right? In that, hey, you're able to pursue this entrepreneurial dream and succeed in that game and have it pay off. I mean, I don't know if there's anything I misrepresented there, Joe, but that's kind of
not at all.
Summarized.
Your fingers on the pulse, right? And it's not like I know all entrepreneurs out there, but I know a good chunk of them, and there's no doubt that lots of entrepreneurs share very common traits across the board. The financial aspect of things is very important, but it's not what drives you through this entire process. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What drives you is the satisfaction of looking at yourself or looking at what the organization been able to achieve by addressing a certain market need, and the ability to really build an innovative product that everybody should be proud of, right? The ability to build a machine. Like I'm very happy to tell you that apart from the financial aspect of things, which the company is super healthy and does great, and we haven't lost a dime ever since we launched the organization, I could tell you that Axiom and the Scarlett product is a machine.
Yeah.
Right? It's a machine of people and technology. And I always like to refrain from saying that you're just a machine of technology, because without the people that we have within this company, there would be no product. I would say the most interesting part of our company is the people behind it and the brain power that.
Yeah. No, it's such a good point. And yeah, I kind of had that moment, and BluMortgage, I don't think is quite to the same scale that you guys are at. So it's probably even bigger for you. I had it the first time when, BluMortgage, just the name, I guess, for me, when it was, me and Massimo, who very well, my co-founder, just saying, hey, let's start something called BluMortgage. And it was just an idea that we thought of in our heads one day. And that's what it was. And now it's, on the lips, so to speak, of thousands of people nationwide. I think that was one of the exciting moments for me, and for you, again, like I said, even a bigger scale, to say an idea that we just thought of is now a concept that many people understand, yes, but also provide a lot of value for. It's a cool thing, right? I think that's an exciting thing, and if I could relate to what you were saying, that was one moment for me.
And the other point is being at the front of innovation, right? I mean, we respect and look at our competitors, It's very important that you keep an eye on what's going on in the industry, and I think our competitors do a great job. But from our own perspective, we would like to think and believe that we are at the front of innovation. We work very hard to innovate and introduce new products and new ways to doing things. Sometimes it's not just about how everybody's used to doing certain tasks. It's about potentially changing the way you do your business, right? And so, not that we succeed with every one of those, but we work quite hard to be at the front lines of innovation day in and day out.
Yeah. Well, talk to me a little bit about that. I think, it's a double-edged sword. I think can be applied to both for you as a technology company provider, but even just an individual broker who's trying to implement tech or really anything in their business. And the double-edged sword of innovation I talk about, or what I'm alluding to, is to say, you can go and you can spend some resources and you can build something and it can be great, right? And it can make people's lives better. It can provide a ton of value. And that's the success story. But there's also a lot of new ideas, innovation, so to speak, that you do that. You go through, maybe some of these hoops, you bring it to market. And I'm not saying you specifically, more the general you, and hey, it wasn't as successful as we thought. And so those resources that we spent to go build this feature that we thought would be good feels a little bit wasted. So it's a tough thing. And I think we struggle with it too sometimes, to say, hey, there's this cool new innovative thing that was out there and we'd love to get our hands on it, but also understanding the right amount of time and effort to dedicate towards it, I should say, before knowing really kind of what the value would be on the other side. So it's a tricky game to play. And I'm just curious kind of your guys' approach as it relates to that. It's almost like product management in a sense, but what factors do you consider, and how do you really find the best thing to build at any given time?
I think that's a great topic. It's a great question. Listen, if I was to tell you that we've got the secret sauce, no.
You don't have it?
Okay.
Let's
tell the truth, right? Yeah, there's no secret sauce to this, but I could tell you how we think about innovation. You're absolutely right. Like sometimes we do things that are not necessarily the immense success that we're hoping it would be. Sometimes it just flops. But I can tell you the formula we tend to follow usually when it comes to innovation. I'll give you a couple of quick examples here as how things fit. So the way we think about innovation here, Tom, is it's not about adding more work to the end user, right? So the end user to us is a combination of a few things. Could be the broker, could be the lender, could be the actual applicant, could be a number of different individuals. We believe innovation should be working in the background in an automated fashion, right? So for example, I'll give you a simple example. When we first launched Scarlett Genius, which is a product AI-based product placement system. The idea coming from a number of different individuals as we were designing the products. Okay, well, we'll give you access so you can plug in your data and the system would recommend the product. But, this is not just how we do things. It didn't actually fit the kind of the DNA of the Scarlett platform. So the way Scarlett Genius works, as soon as an applicant or a broker or a user punches or receives an application, the system is automatically harnessing that data and attempting to provide a product recommendation on the fly, technically with almost no human intervention whatsoever. I mean, that's just a simple example, right? It's about introducing innovation in a way that has the least amount of friction.
Yeah.
And so we found that formula tends to work. There's no secret sauce, but the formula tends to work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting idea. I think that, one thing that it makes me think of, with AI, I mean, we'll if we can get into AI more later, and it seems it's always a recurring theme here, but on this show, I mean, is, the real technical side of thing is these big LLMs, large language models, ChatGPT, Llama, which is Facebook's, all of them, so I won't get into it. But was really interesting for me, and how it relates to what you're talking about, is seeing this arc, and it's going on right now, is that yes, there was a lot of value. Yes, ChatGPT is an incredibly successful and has a ton of enterprise value, but there were a lot of, and still continue to be a lot of people out there who are making what I call ChatGPT wrappers, right? It's almost like a candy bar where it's still the same candy in the middle, which is the whole ChatGPT.
Open AI engine or something, right?
Exactly. It's the engine, but the wrapper is just a layer on top of it. So it's the thing that wraps it. And that's what's being sold, because what that wrapper provides, is, that user experience. Because at the end of the day, that's equally innovative, right? Of how does a person from whatever platform they're in very easily access this incredibly technical and interesting tool called ChatGPT. And if you can make that easier for someone, then there's a whole business right there, and just connecting the bridge between the user and wherever they are to this technical innovation, and providing that layer of just connecting those two ideas is hugely, hugely valuable. And I think it's similar, to what you were describing. Maybe in your case, you're doing both. You're providing both the technical, cool solution and the way that it connects to the user's experience, but both are equally important. And I think that middle layer is often forgot of, right? People usually want super cool technical things, but that middle layer of how a user can actually interact with it is almost equally important.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you agree or disagree to that. Yeah.
And listen, I totally agree. And the point here is, we run a significantly large platform. It's very feature rich, and we're not going to talk about all that stuff. And so the last thing we want to do is teach the user anything new on top of what they already learned on the platform, unless it is an absolute necessity, right?
Sure. Yep.
Where there's no other option. Like anything that we could do through some form of automation. I'm trying to simplify it here as much as I can. That's the approach. And so there's no doubt that our Scarlett Genius product, for example, or system that's embedded inside of almost the majority of the tools that we have is fully automated and requires zero learning curve, right? It requires almost no human intervention. All it requires is a set of eyes on a human being to consume that information and pick the product that makes most sense to that specific deal. And just to help, our audience, to help put things into context, is when you have a mortgage transaction coming through the door, you want to be able to speed through the process and not have them go through oodles and oodles of rate sheets to find out what is the best product or what is the best lender for that specific deal. You want the system to automatically recommend what would be that best lender product, right? Given that it also allows you to customize how the system interacts. For example, you might not be dealing with lenders A, D, and F, right? Without naming names. And so the system allows you to configure those lenders as do not recommend, just to put it simplistically. And I mean, the configuration is endless here, but
of course,
I mean, this is kind of how we operate.
Yeah. Well, it's it makes sense, but one thing that I would say when I think about this is, this is complex stuff, right? You talk about, okay, the configurations, and they can be endless, and I'm sure they can. I probably don't know the tip of the iceberg because we don't have a similar product, but it's probably you've gone deep into it and all those different things. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think since Dong joining the organization, that's a hat that you've worn more of, kind of the more product and engineering side of things. I think it's something that excites, just kind of hearing you talk about it. I can sense the excitement in your voice. So I guess, first of all, again, is my assumption / understanding right, where you've kind of gone deeper into this more technical, very interesting, almost product design of how do we build useful tools in a user-friendly way? And what did that transition look like? I mean, if that's true, how did you guys how maybe still today, how do you kind of divide labor? How do you think about the different hats you guys can wear?
Yeah. So let's talk about Dong and obviously him being the Axiom CEO.
Yeah.
Before we get into the different hats, I think it is somewhat important to kind of shed some light as to what was the reason for a new CEO at Axiom Innovations, right?
Absolutely.
One of the most important things, I think, from any business leader is to understand what they can and cannot do, right? With their strength. And
that second one's hard for a lot of people, right?
You got your ego side, for sure. There's lots of egos, but when your company or the organization is somewhat your baby, and I mean it in every sense, right? I've got 2 kids, and I would say Axiom is my first child, right? You help raise that little infant to become...
You nurture it,
you feed it, and it becomes an older child and eventually an adult, right?
And then it becomes a machine, like you said earlier, which is self-sustaining, which is a whole new level of excitement to see it operate without your nurturing, right? So,
absolutely. Yeah. You're playing on. So Don, or let's talk about a CEO position, right?
Yeah.
We got to a point where the company required a strong business leader, right? Someone who was well connected in the space, someone who has a well proven track record, right? And someone who wasn't Joe Fakhri. Right.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Wasn't Joe Fakhri not on the person, wasn't the same character traits, wasn't the same personality,
got it.
had a slightly different mindset and spin on things, yet needed to complement Joe Fakhri and not go against Joe Fakhri, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the main reasons why Axiom has a new CEO, right? And the other part is, for business continuity purposes, right? We got to a point where I did not want Axiom to be Joe Fakhri, right? Like when people think, so Joe Fakhri is Axiom and Axiom is Joe Fakhri,
Yeah.
right? And so from a business continuity perspective, I think the people needed to think as Scarlett and as Axiom as kind of its own persona, right?
Standalone.
Yes, Joe's associated with it,
Yeah.
but
Works there. Joe works there.
Joe
Yeah.
works there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Joe works there, but it needed its own persona. And so
Mhm.
that's another main reason why Dong is here. And I got to a point where obviously, which is the lesser of the reasons. So there was nothing personal in there,
Mhm.
but I was wearing too many hats, right?
Yeah.
We needed to divide and conquer. And one of the first things that Dong and I agreed on is said, we're not going to replicate each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm not going to be in every meeting and in every move that you make and vice versa. Right. So we're going to divide and conquer. And obviously I went back to my true love, which is product development and engineering.
Yep.
We'll be doing that for a while up until at some point that role will be handed over to somebody else.
Sure.
But yeah, like I went back to my true passion, to my true skill set. I'm a software engineer by trade. AI is actually my thesis in my grad studies. Yep.
In what year? What year did you do it?
I graduated in 2002.
Okay. So you were talking about AI way
Yeah.
ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah. And to be quite frank with you, like I studied and it was my grad studies, the area of my studies, yet I didn't know how AI exactly will take form. Obviously, you've got the typical classification exercises and all that stuff, classification problems to solve. And yeah, of course, we knew that. But how it was to become as a live product or products, that was a bit of an unknown back in 2002. We speculated about a bunch of different things, right?
Yeah, it was unknown in 2020, right? All those things, but I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So that's kind of like the main reason.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to bring the full story together, full circle as to what was the reason behind the new CEO, and what's the reason and the main reason why Dong is actually in that role, and
Yeah.
And last but not least is how we're dividing our tasks across the board.
Yeah, it's a very cool idea too, and it almost comes back to this baby analogy of to say, yeah, Axiom is its own thing, right? It has been separated from me as its parent who had nurtured it until it's 18, but now it's off in the wilderness. Now it's off to school. Now it's whatever the similar analogy will be, and it's its own thing. And I think that's it's both exciting and scary as it would be for a kid, right? To have it off and do its own thing, but for growth, I think growth for both you specifically and for the company, it's necessary, right? Because in a way, you get to a point as you are with a kid where you're both holding each other back in a certain kind of weird way, right? Where for you, maybe it's, yeah, you want to get more into engineering. For the company, maybe there's some biases that you overlay that you don't realize are there. And so, that separation is exciting and necessary, even if it seems a bit scary at the time, so to speak. Maybe just real quick on the Dong thing. One thing I'm curious about is, okay, yeah, you were wearing a lot of hats. You had 10 hats on. Now you gave 5 of those hats to Dong. You divided and conquered, which is a great idea. Was that difficult? Like, okay, I take these 5, you take those 5. But the very first meeting that Dong maybe ran for the first sales meeting, because now he wears the sales hat. Did you really want to be in on that, or was that a smooth transition for you? Or how did you make sure that you didn't just slip into your old ways kind of after that transition happened?
First of all, I would say it was a breeze.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
good.
can tell you it was a breeze. Onboarding Dong was a breeze. I mean, that's not because I'm good at what I do. Sometimes I'm good and sometimes I'm not. It's just Dong and I go way back.
Yeah, sure.
So we've had we were colleagues and we have a very long-standing working relationship with each other that goes back to 2008. So technically, Dong and I worked together from 2008 till 2016,
Yes,
beginning of 2016. Sure. So we have a lot of history together. He knows my style. I know his style. We're two very different people. Very different people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, and maybe I'm sure in the podcast that you had with Dong, you might have asked him that question, how he felt about the transition. For me, it was easy for sure. I mean,
Dong, it was terrible in his podcast. No, I can. Yeah,
sure. This is how him and I disagree on a lot of things.
No, I'm just teasing. Yeah.
But the one thing is, obviously, Don came in from a brokerage network style business into a technology company, and that's a significant mind shift.
Totally.
We're moving into much more fast-paced environment, very tech-heavy. So that was obviously a transition. I mean, I would leave that question to Don.
Sure.
From the outset, I think he did great, but there's no doubt that him and I spent a lot of time together to make sure, the gaps were filled where they needed to be filled, right? Especially on the product training, on the ins and outs of the product. What really is the stack that drives, not necessarily from a technical standpoint, but what really drives the product on the back end. Obviously, the sales folks who all run under Dong, they need to have that level of information in order to speak intelligently about the product and be able to sell it. Because, selling this kind of stuff is not easy, and the sales cycle is fairly long.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's kudos to you in a sense, right? Because, I've heard a ton, but stories similar like this where, hey, a transition happens and, 2 weeks in, someone, wearing the dong in the dong situation here would be just sitting there saying, I have nothing to do because, the Joe in this situation just still wants to do everything. So the fact that you are able to take off those hats and keep them off, I think that's kudos to you, like I said, and shows that kind of that humility. So that's, congrats in that sense.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. You know what? My approach is this. You want my help? Let me know. Otherwise, I'm not going to stick my nose into anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good approach, and I can say from my personal experience, it's tough. I mean, it's tough. We have 2 new team members who sometimes take responsibilities that I used to do, and it's hard to let go. But you have to, right, in order to scale, in order to do all those things, right?
You're right. I would say maybe I would have acted differently with a different CEO, like somebody I didn't know, right? Somebody that was brought onto the job and you have very little history with. But granted that we've had such a long history from before, I was very comfortable with the process. I trust Dong, right? And technically, technically and non-technically, Dong is my partner, right?
Yeah.
And so we run everything based on a very high degree of trust. Otherwise, there's no way you can run this sort of company. Granted that, yes, I mean we're just under 40 employees, 39, and technically we're running a 65 to 70 person company with so we're fairly understaffed, right? Sure. So our finger needs to be on the pulse all the time.
Constantly. Yeah, constantly. Yeah. And I think you nailed it in the sense of the trust, right? And I think that's such a valuable thing that you had, whatever that was, those 8 years to really build that up, because it's not overnight, but when you spend 8 years working with someone, you know how they work, their ins and outs, and hey, this is the type of person that if they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. And those are rare people to find too, right? So it's that double whammy of just finding someone who can do that and then having that level of trust with them. It's both those things. So, I mean, congrats again to both of you for establishing the partnership.
Thank you.
I think maybe just to wrap up here, I think kind of one thing I'd love to kind of just get your thoughts on, in the pre-survey I sent you, you mentioned, hey, what was the biggest holy cow moment for you as it relates to tech? And you said the internet, and this might show my age a little bit, is that, I kind of wasn't, in the workforce or in school really as the internet was coming about. And I completely am envious, so to speak, of you kind of going through that stage, because I'm a big believer in the concept that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Like, that's the idea. So I think that there is so much to learn. And I think it's often overlooked of this .com internet boom bust and then eventual growth again in that internet phase that can probably apply to the next couple of years, or even the year that we're currently in, as we're kind of trying to maneuver ourselves in this AI age. And so, I mean, you obviously have a ton of experience in AI too. So, I mean, maybe we could start just there, talking about what was that moment like for you in the whatever it would have been 90s with the internet, and really where you maybe can draw some parallels to today, right? What are some lessons learned that might make sense today? A lot there, a bit of a broad question, but take that any way you like.
Yeah. So the internet. So just to preface as well. So obviously I wasn't an entrepreneur at the time when the internet, really became available to the masses and became this huge success. But nonetheless, I was already in my field of studies when I was introduced to the internet. And, it was a big wow moment. As soon as you start to delve into it and understand the capabilities, what it can and cannot do. And in the back of my mind, I was like, this is going to completely change the way we do business. This is going to change the way we run our lives technically, right? And what I like about the internet the most, to tell you the truth, is the fact that it is the foundation to disruption. It's not the fact that it disrupted everything, disrupted the way we do business. It disrupted the way we live our lives. Look at your like most people are glued to their smartphone on a daily basis, right? Yeah. But it actually is the foundation to disrupting, it was the foundation to introducing disruptive technology. It is the foundation of disruption, right? Yeah. Look at any other disrupting technology that was, pushed or released over the past 10, 15 years or so, right? Just as an example, its foundation is the internet. Yeah. Smartphones, Netflix, Uber,
Netflix,
and the list goes on and on. Without the internet, none of that stuff exists. And so there's no, definitely it's like the Industrial Revolution of our age.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, even, you talking about the internet being cool, it makes us sound old, right? Because, now that we've been in an internet age for 30 years, it almost seems like a baseline assumption. It's like, of course, what are you talking about, right? Of course the internet's cool. We've been using it forever. What do you...
It's like a car. It's a vehicle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've been riding horses for thousands of years. And I think it's, it's an interesting idea. And if I kind of now fast forward, try to draw the parallels, I think people are in a similar spot where they see ChatGPT and some of these cool things, and they go, okay, well, what else? And it's like, whoa. I get that all the time. How is Blue using AI? And there are ways that we're doing it, but a lot of the time I just want to turn around and say, no, just use the ChatGPT, use this. But already I feel that it's almost baked into the baseline where it's like, yeah, that's old news. What's the next exciting thing? So I don't know if you agree with that, but that's one takeaway I kind of, when you were describing that, I say it's kind of interesting how very quickly we move on from the baseline, that underlying technology, and we instantly as humans want to go to, okay, but what's the disruption? What's the thing that's really actually going to make an impact in my life? And maybe that's a good thing, right? It's at the end of the day, we want to be focused on things that are driving real results.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just to touch a little bit on AI, it's such a big topic, right?
Yeah.
We're scratching the surface with AI.
Yeah.
And the thing is, every time you talk AI, people automatically gravitate towards ChatGPT. And there's no doubt that ChatGPT, Claude, all the
Anthropic, all
chatbots,
they're
a form of AI, it's specifically Gen AI. I think the real power, obviously there's tons to be done still, but I, in my own opinion, machine learning is where we're going to see significant innovation as well and advancements.
For the audience, like, what's, like, super simple, what's the difference between, how is ChatGPT not machine learning? Like, what would be different? And what's maybe an example you could give?
There's no doubt that it has some form of machine learning, right? But Gen AI, think about, ChatGPT and ChatGPT-style systems are an input, right, and an output type situation. And there's no doubt in the background, it's actually learning, right? Mm-hmm. Every piece of information that you pump into it, it's saving it in its own database. Whatever you're trying to do here, like trying to get, reformat an email or write a more polished email or write some content, or even generate an image, right? Every time it does it better and better and better as all this input and all these responses come out. So it's an input output type systems versus machine learning, where you technically the human being or the individual is not going to be pumping, technically, like manually pumping much information. The system is automatically going to learn on its own as it harnesses the data coming from the different sources, right? So again, since we started with one example, I'll carry on with the same example over and over again. Our Scarlett Genius product, right, is not a ChatGPT style system. It will have a ChatGPT style prompt to it, but that's not the essence of the product. Think about it this way. This product is harnessing all the deal information since Scarlett was born, right? Since 2020, Scarlett mortgage, one of our products, our point of sale or origination platform. It's harnessing all this information and also knows historically, and I'm trying to keep it simple again,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah. There's these things
It
don't
also
work.
knows it also knows every deal that's been submitted to every lender, and it also knows the output of that.
Yeah.
Has this lender been able to accept this deal? So technically, the user is not really trying to ask the system any questions. The system is harnessing this information, right?
Sure.
And based on the results and based on the constant results that we keep feeding it on a daily basis, it's able to classify and tell us what lender is going to be best suitable for that specific deal.
Sure.
So that's machine learning to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So the point more so is, okay, ChatGPT, it's Gen AI, it's I give an input, I get an output from the system, and that's great, and that does stuff. And yes, it can be applied in a ton of different domains, but the machine learning is it's almost like a higher level classification of that, right? To say, this
It's more automated. I'm going to give you another example that has nothing to do with accounting,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
I drive my son to swimming lessons every Wednesday, right?
Sure.
I don't have anything in my calendar, right? Nothing. All of a sudden, my phone now learned at 10 to 6 on a Wednesday afternoon, I need to drive to this location. How did it know that? That's machine learning to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, yes, okay. So it's much, I think maybe the point is that if you stick to the Chat GPT mind frame, it's too narrow almost, right? If you do that and you think all AI is going to be related to that, you're not thinking big enough, right? Is that maybe the right?
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
I think the power is going to be when the AI brain, right, and the machine learning is actually embedded inside the different tools that you utilize, and the system is able to do either work on your behalf
Yeah.
or do predictive modeling for you, right? Or assist you in doing certain things. That's where the machine learning is going to become extremely impactful, where it's going to further automate tasks that usually are time consuming.
Yep. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yes, it's not just going to be a chatbot. That's too narrow.
Right.
It's everything and more, right? And
And we're scratching the surface. We're absolutely scratching the surface.
yeah. No, I mean, and it's exciting, right? I mean, in that sense too, is, the fact that we're at the surface and knowing that it can just continue to go deep and deep and deep. I think that's where the excitement is, right? I always say from a product or whatever perspective, you can go wide, you can try a bunch of different things, or you can go deep. And really the exciting things are in the depths. And that's my opinion, at least, of saying, okay, the deeper you go, the more interesting things. Listen, Joe, we're kind of running on time here, and this kind of flew by, but this was an amazing chat, and I really appreciate the time. I guess maybe before we sign off, any, I guess, final quick thoughts on really anything we talked about, and for folks who want to get in touch, want to learn a little bit more, whether it's about your Genius product or otherwise, how could
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, happy to answer any questions, not necessarily about our product. Like
yeah.
when folks want to chat about technology, want to run a new idea, I'm happy to chat. My contact details. And you want me to share my contact details on your?
Choice? Yeah, throw it out there. We'll also put them in the show notes if that's easier, because I know you already provided those on
Yeah, I mean,
things. Yeah,
you
but
know,
yeah,
with a name like Joe Fakhri, I think it probably it's not going to be as clear. And yeah, feel free to share my contact details. I'd be happy to chat with folks. But in closing, a question that gets asked often is there's a lot of confusion around, not confusion, but there's a lot of question and uncertainty about when to adapt to new technologies. They hear a new buzzword. They need to be, they want to be able to not necessarily adopt, but learn more about it. My advice is the following. I mean, there's no doubt that you need to keep your finger on the pulse and understand what's being offered out there. Rely on your service providers and your technology partners to educate you on what's possible and what's not. There's no doubt that AI is a huge buzzword nowadays. I would say walk before you could run.
Yeah.
But the one thing I want to tell folks is everybody keeps telling me, is AI going to replace me? And I would say, you know what? AI will not replace you, right? I have a ton of examples on that why, and we can go historically why.
Yeah.
But I could tell you one thing is people that use AI will replace people that don't use AI.
Yeah, sure.
But you will have to adapt to technology. You don't necessarily need to be early adopters, because early adopters, you need to make sure that you have the capacity,
Yeah.
the financial means to do it sometimes, so you can play with technology. But you need to keep an eye and make sure that you're educated enough and know when to utilize or consume a certain service. And that comes by keeping an eye on what's going on, by having conversations with service providers. And I would say any service provider that is obviously a reliable and a service provider that cares ethically about their customers, they'll be more than happy to educate them on what's possible, what's not possible, and what's out there.
Absolutely.
And so we're always happy to do that. I know lots of people are confused or uncertain or nervous, and they kind of don't know, especially now the AI era commencing. But I could tell you, the next 24 months are going to be very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, because a lot of the experimentation kind of is already faded. And a lot of the organizations that pretended to be AI or have an AI platform enabled or introduced in the market, they've kind of they kind of faded away, right? They tried, they failed. Now, the companies that are proven to be working properly, such as, ChatGPT or a lot of the services that you see, moving forward, we're going to start to see the real proper adoption and the real adaptability of AI in our space and in other spaces as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's just been an explosion. So many companies, 90% of them are probably going to be noise, but now the 10%, the signal is coming through,
Right.
And that's an exciting time. And
Right.
You're exactly right. I think the fact that we are just scratching the surface, the most valuable thing right now is just more information, is just learning. And it doesn't mean, you have to do a PhD thesis like you did, Joe, but it means, the best source of information, I think, is your network, and service providers like Axiom, like Scarlett are going to be some of the best parts of your network.
Pick your sources. There's tons of information out there. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the information is correct and accurate. Unfortunately, there's lots of noise.
Absolutely.
AI can help you with that, to cycle through that. But yeah, pick your sources and, pick your reliable sources. There's tons of information. And the thing is, we don't have enough time in a day to sit and read information all day.
Yep.
You have to pick and choose, and that's the secret sauce there.
And that's the place we're in right now. Listen, Joe, I really do appreciate the time. Thanks again for everyone watching and listening. I will put Joe's details in the show notes. Please don't hesitate to reach out to him. I'm going to speak on his behalf, but he's always been an open book with me, and I'm sure he will be with you. So thanks again, Joe. This was amazing, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.